Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Q&A 50.
Woohoo! We made it. It took a long time.
It did take a long time. I don't remember how fast we started doing them, but it was pretty early on, I think. So almost round about 3 years.
Yeah.
Which I've been getting all these little memories and stuff on my social media that show me that I was announcing the podcast 3 years ago about this time. And how excited you and I were when we got our first literal 100 downloads.
Yes.
We're like, oh, that's so many more people than we thought we'd ever reach. A whole 100. And so, I don't know, I was, as we were getting ready to do this one today, I was talking with Michelle. I was like, oh, right along with Q&A 50, we could be all celebratory about the fact that we recently crossed the threshold also of 500,000 downloads.
Which
in those 3 years.
That's wild, you guys.
Right? It is wild. And it starts with a 50, and it made me very excited. 500,000 downloads. Anyway, we love you all, and we're flabbergasted, and thank you. We were really excited when there were 100 of you. We cannot tell you how excited we are now. It still makes us go, us?
Yep.
What? Mm-hmm. Huh? Every time. Anyway, so I for one am thoroughly excited about both reaching our 50th Q&A, which seems somehow nice that we reached
this for a while.
Yes, and it's on our very near our 3-year anniversary, so it feels like a kind of good milepost to line up with our anniversary and with the 500,000 downloads. So I'm just all excited about numbers today, Michelle. But why don't you get us started with the first?
Okay,
Q&A
I will get us started.
question.
I'm excited with you, though. It's really exciting. Okay, the first one, it's a bit of a downer, but here we go. So it says, I've been really struggling with loving myself lately. I seem to be self-hating every chance I get. I feel hopeless and overwhelmed. I don't do my DBT diary card anymore. I don't want to go to therapy, and I've even tried new medications. New medications. I just feel like there's no hope for me anymore.
I was reading this one, and I hope listener who wrote this doesn't sound dismissive, but Michelle was expressing how hard this sounded, which it does. And also I was realizing that when I was reading through it, my brain was like, oh, that sounds like so much of my life. Like I just immediately related to it. And so I wanted to let the listener know that I was like, okay, yep, I feel like I have spent a not inconsiderable amount of my life there in a similar kind of space. And so I wanted to share that I almost never am able to do a great job of changing course mentally until I meet myself where I am without judgment. A big part of this often for me means forgiving myself for not even having the desire to do the quote unquote good or healthy things, which I really heard in this listener talking about. I don't want to go to therapy. I don't do my, diary cards anymore. I'm just not into it. And so, getting judgmental of ourselves is really quite the habitual pastime sport for some of us, getting really self-hating and really self-judgmental, and especially when we're not living up to what we see as either the expectations of others or our own expectations. And so for me, one of the things that helps me the most is trying to let go of the expectations that I be somewhere else, and instead just see where I am and be kind and forgiving of myself being where I am. Also, as backwards as this may initially seem, I wanted to point out that while the judgment is really awful feeling, the judgment also implies wanting the thing, right? The fact that you are judging yourself for not wanting it implies an underlying wanting of it, right? There would be nothing to hold yourself against. There would be nothing to judge yourself for if there wasn't some underlying desire to be headed in the quote-unquote healthy or good directions. Right? Same thing with your question to us here. It really does a lot to imply the hope that you don't consciously feel, right? Asking for help is an act of hope, because you hope you'll get help. You hope that help will lead you out of the space you're in, right? There is hope in the asking, just like there is wanting in the judging. And so that's the kind of thing that I often can't see until I try to let go of the expectations. I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but right, that's just really meeting yourself where you are, meeting yourself where you are, and meeting yourself where you are as often as you can, which is in a way a kind of radical acceptance, right? You are where you are, no matter how judgmental you feel about that. That is still the space you're in, right? Another thing I know I've shared before with folks who are struggling for self-love is to maybe don't try and make the incredible leap from self-hatred to self-love. That's an awfully large gap between those two mental spaces. And so I really advocate for finding self-tolerance first. That's a smaller step. That's a little bit more within grasp. It still might be a bit of a pole vault, but it's not like, an Evel Knievel dare jump across the Grand Canyon to get there. And so it's often more within sight of self-hatred than self-love is. As for particular skills, because I try and make sure I mention at least one DBT skill somewhere in there. Self-soothe, right? Hating yourself and being in an incredibly overwhelmed and hopeless space sucks hard. And so can you take care of yourself a little bit with self-soothing? Be tender, be kind, try and take care of your body and your brain. And then also check the facts, right? For instance, a lot of things might be, I don't know, if I'm in the self-hating space, it might be something like, I've never accomplished anything. That could be a nice self-hating judgment. And that would be a great one to run by check the facts, though, right? Hang on a second. Is that true? Do I have supporting data? Do I have, data that actually contradicts that? So to that mind, a little bit wise mind can also be brought in there. A little bit to just try and be like, okay, well, that's what my emotion mind is saying, is that I'm a worthless sack of shit. But does my reason mind bear that out, right? Do I have that data to support that idea? Or is that just my emotion mind kind of running away with me? So those are my thoughts. What about you, Michelle? Really
good thoughts. I don't know if I have too much more to add on besides what you're saying, because, you hit on a lot of really wonderful things there in your response. But for me, the biggest DBT skill that came to mind for this was opposite action. And the reason why opposite action came up, because you were just talking about check the facts, checking what your thoughts are telling you, the self-hating thoughts. What are they telling you? Is that actually true, kind of a thing? And then, if it's not true, then act opposite, right? That's what DBT says to do. But I was almost conceptualizing opposite action as sometimes I think of it as this standalone thing that can really help with depression. Not that it's easy to do in any way, because it's not easy to do, but it's how you've conceptualized it before, Kate, about Nike it, just do it kind of a thing. The depression will always tell you to not do it. Don't go for that walk. There's no point in reaching out to this person. None of this matters. That is what it is going to say. And it's making this conscious effort to say, even if that's true, I'm going to do it anyways. I'm still going to reach out to this person, even if they may not get back to me. I'm still going to go for that walk, even if I'm exhausted. I'm still going to try to do these things. And we say this a lot too, make it as small as possible until you actually do it. Don't set too high of a bar for yourself. But being in that opposite action state of mind may help a little bit, because sometimes we have to do the things for like that wanting that you were speaking to, Kate, for the wanting to then come back, right? If you like kind of force yourself to go for a walk around the block, then you come home and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Okay. And then the next day, there might be a little more of a wanting to have that experience again. But you have to like first just do it sometimes. So that's what I was thinking of. And being really patient with yourself. Have so much patience as you do this. And again, without shame, judgment of yourself, just make the steps as small as possible until you do them. I was also thinking as like a mentality shift that I think sometimes too, when you're, struggling with depression, it's super common to just want to be like, I need something good to happen to make me feel better. And sometimes when we're like looking for those good things and we're not finding them easily, then it can be really discouraging. And sometimes I think it just comes down to like just at times being proud of yourself for not making things worse. Like things may not be good, but are you at least doing things to try to take care of yourself? Like some of the elements of please and stuff like that. Again, you're probably maybe using some opposite action to do the please. Are you at least doing that to try to make sure that even when things are hopeless and you're overwhelmed, that you're still eating? Like that kind of an idea. Then it's not making things worse than they already are. So there may not be a whole lot of good, but if you're trying to keep up with those pieces of please, it will hopefully help the bad things not be as bad as they could be as if you weren't doing please at all. That tends to make bad things even worse. And Kate already kind of spoke to this, so I'll just say it in a sentence. I just wrote down in my notes, like, let go of expecting big shifts. That isn't how it usually works. And Kate already really, really spoke to that with the idea of like, it's too high of a bar to shift from self-hatred to self-love. That big shift is not going to happen. Again, it's not like you're going to go for a walk around the block and be like, awesome, I feel great. You're not. You're probably not going to feel that way. But will you feel worse for having gone on the walk around the block? Hopefully not. If you try to make that a habit, then hopefully after a couple weeks, might it start feeling a little better than in the beginning? Hopefully. That's kind of the idea there.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay,
on to the next one. Pardon me. So this one says, for those diagnosed with BPD, borderline personality disorder, when getting close to new people, making friends and dating, how or when do you disclose your diagnosis, if at all? Therapists, do you have any advice on this? Is it better to be transparent or keep a low profile?
Yeah, this was posted in our Facebook group, and I love that they were like, therapists, do you have any advice? Because we have a lot of therapists who are in our Facebook group who have probably some good guidance to give. Oh gosh, I'm about to give like the most vague answer ever, but truly when you're asking like how or when do you disclose your diagnosis, it depends. It depends on a number of things. I think some of it depends on, for you, right? Like, how is it feeling to be with that person? How are you feeling on these dates? I recommend to not disclose on the first date because you need to give yourself a chance to just see how you feel around this person, to see if this is somebody you're going to want to go on a second date with in the first place before sharing some of that bigger stuff about your life. It may depend on how open the other person is seeming, right? If they're disclosing quite a bit and seeming pretty open and seeming pretty vulnerable, then you might find yourself feeling, more open to sharing things like that too. But as a general rule of thumb, and I think we did talk about this on our episode we have about DBT and dating, I do recommend sharing within the first couple of dates. I would not recommend like dating somebody for months and months and months and months and then you finally share it. With that question about like, if at all, yes, I do think that at some point it should be shared no matter what. And I do think that earlier tends to be better within the first few dates. Before the two of you have maybe decided to be exclusive, but things feel like they're going well. And hopefully that is the time where both of you are starting to dive in more to your histories, to those more messy parts of yourselves, the things that you don't share with just anybody. You do want to share those with the person that you're getting to know, and to see what they say and how they respond. And also, if you do start to notice that some, I don't know the best way to put it necessarily, but like some of your BPD stuff is flaring up, you could say. Let's say they're not texting you back consistently. That's probably going to bring up some fears of abandonment. Let's say you're noticing, right, those urges within yourself to maybe just, I don't know, call them repeatedly until they answer and that kind of a thing. If you notice some of that stuff coming up, it would be ideal if you've already disclosed that to them, to say, hey, this is a mental health diagnosis I have. This is how it tends to show up. You might notice some of these things, and I just want to let you know why and what's behind that. Because if they don't already know that, you definitely want to share at that point, if you haven't already, to say, hey, I know I was doing this earlier, or this is the fears that were coming up for me when you did X, Y, and Z, and I want to let you know why. So you definitely want to make sure to give context to why some BPD type things may be appearing in the relationship if they do start to show up. And that is, again, another reason why sharing it earlier rather than later, I would say, is a pretty good rule of thumb. That's me.
Okay. So I don't, last time you're like, I don't have a lot to add. I will say I don't have a huge amount to add to what you were saying advice-wise. I think the only two things I would say is, one, just 100% not as advice, but just as self-disclosure for myself. I do lean on pretty early disclosure. I've mentioned mental health difficulties even sometimes in like my profile on dating sites. But that's because for me, mental health in so many different respects is a part of my everyday life, right? From my profession to my personal lived experience to my family and friends. So it's kind of a litmus test for me. I need to know, honestly, I'd like to know before I even go out on a first date if this is in any way, shape, or form going to be a fucking problem for somebody, because bye. Right? Just fucking bye. I need to know how this person is going to handle this subject, because, yeah, I mean, almost everyone I love in my life, myself, my profession, it's all rests on people being able to not have stigma in the same way around mental health issues. So my disclosure is wildly early. That's not me giving advice to other people, just saying where I come from and how I do it myself. And then for relationships where maybe it's not so clear that it's probably pretty vital that the person know, like, for instance, developing close friendships or dating relationships, things like that. If this is more, I don't know, coworker or acquaintance type friend or something like that, it might be worth doing a pros and cons for the possibility of disclosing, right? I think there's some relationships where it's pretty clear cut that disclosure is pretty appropriate, right? Going to be necessary at some point before you get too far down the line. But there are definitely edge case relationships. And so I can absolutely imagine utilizing pros and cons to see what you think about disclosing in that particular relationship. So,
yeah. I actually really like your thinking there, Kate, on the rationale for maybe disclosing even before you go on a date. And that does actually make a lot of sense, right? Like, if you've been chatting with somebody, getting to know each other for a little while and that kind of a thing, like, yeah, you might not be sharing this in the first conversation, but yeah, like, it does make sense to be like, this is something really important for me to know how you feel about this before we even take the leap into like meeting in person.
I don't want to waste my time.
No, totally, right? Yeah, I don't want to waste my time. And especially if you've already been like, I don't know, texting for a little while, FaceTiming for a little while, and that kind of a thing. If it feels like the two of you are really starting to establish some kind of a connection, even if you've never gone on a date, it could totally be worth sharing. So, I like that perspective a lot, actually. Okay, the next one's a little bit longer than the two before it so far. So this one says, my sibling is diagnosed with dependent personality disorder and is not accepting their diagnosis. They are mirroring their partners and friends to the point of completely changing their identity every time their relationships change. They're meeting 7 of 9 BPD criteria, though they don't have this diagnosis yet. Tomorrow, they're going to have top surgery as a non-binary person. They never even expressed any trans or non-binary feelings until they started dating a trans man, even though I spoke to them a year before that about my own non-binary, and then they say in parentheses, demi-female/agender, identity. At that time, they didn't understand what I was talking about and told me they never had feelings similar to mine. Now they're telling me this has been going on since childhood. I want to support them, but I just feel so anxious because of the history of very, very extreme mirroring they have. I'm afraid they're going to be hurt, that they'll regret this surgery, and or it'll make their mental health worse or drive them into crisis. I told them about my fears, but they are in complete denial about their dependent personality disorder diagnosis or their BPD diagnosis too. In the end, I told them I think the most important thing is bodily autonomy and that I support them if they believe this is what they need and that I hope they'll be well and that I love them. Still, I'm so afraid. What could I do? What skills to use? I'm struggling with this quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, man, I just can appreciate, or I feel like I can hear in this listener's writing a real deep care for their sibling. Right, a lot of tenderness and worry and like desire for their sibling to be well, and I really want to acknowledge that I feel like that just is very present in their concern and in their questions to us. And I want to try and give some skills specifically, since they ask what skills to use. So the first one that I think about is check the facts, right? The truth of the matter is, you don't know how this will turn out for your sibling. You just can't, right? That's future tripping. That's mind reading. That's prognostication and prophecy. Exactly. The future is not ours to know, right? Or the world would look very different. And so would all of our lives, right? And so you don't know. And that's one of the things that hopefully utilizing Check the Facts would help you see, is that you're telling a lot of story that you don't have necessarily the data to be able to tell. Right? You've got very good inclinations and reasons that you got there, but it's not something solid. It's not something you know. It's something you're supposing or worrying about. And the other thing that Check the Facts I think could really help you see is that you have ways to deal with whatever the outcome may be. Right? There's that lovely part of Check the Facts where it's like, all right, let's assume the worst case scenario actually takes place. How do you cope with it? Right? And I think that that's a really useful part of checking the facts, because it shows you, oh, I do have ways to deal with this, right? If I actually stop at the what if, if I stop stopping, my God, that's an awkward sentence. If I cease stopping, I don't like any of this. Oh, anyway, it's nice to not dead end, there we go, at the what if, but instead to go all the way through the what if to what would you do if, right? It actually ended up going that way. Another skill I would recommend, big surprise to everyone, is self-soothe. Right? But I don't know. I really think of self-soothe as being lovely for sadness and fear, right? Both of those are a little bit more soft, squishy, tender emotions. And I think self-soothe can do a real lot to help get through something that, you don't have the choice to change, right? And so really great for distress tolerance and helping yourself just be in a little bit of a better place. And even if you're not less sad or less fearful, you're at least in a little bit of a better space for feeling those emotions and taking care of yourself as you experience them and move through them. And then last but not least is, I would say, cope ahead. So yeah, all right. It's a little bit of a tweak on a cope ahead, because you're supposed to use cope ahead when you do actually know something is coming down the line at you. So I guess maybe this cope ahead is sort of an extension of that. All right, what if the worst thing came true? How would you cope with it? Part of check the facts, right? Just sort of really leaning into that. All right, how would I cope if shit goes sideways? What would that look like? What skills would I practice? Who would I reach out to, right? Really trying to spell it out for yourself and do a little bit of mental rehearsing on realizing that all of those things are within your grasp, even if things go really sideways for your sibling. I think those are my thoughts.
Nice. For me, what stood out the most reading this was the part, which I think really came right in the middle of what the listener wrote. You know, they start off like introducing us to, this is the situation at hand, this is who my sibling is. But then there's this part in the middle about when they told their sibling, that they were non-binary and they came out, and how the sibling was not accepting of it, didn't understand it, all of that. And then we return at the end to talking about, I'm worried about my sibling and this is why. That middle section stood out to me as being an important piece of the puzzle here. I mean, very likely, right? Anybody would worry about their sibling with like the history that they have and the mental health diagnoses at play, like that worry would be there for a lot of people, but there's not just worry here. I sense that there was really some hurt from that time, and that I don't know if the two of you ever worked through that or really addressed how hard that was for you when you came out to them. And then now maybe there's this sense that you have of like, well, now that they are coming out to me, I'm just supposed to smile and be supportive and that kind of a thing. And no wonder that would be difficult to do when you didn't receive that for yourself with them. So that part seemed important to me, and I don't know what that would look like for you, listener, to take some time, like if you're in therapy yourself, talk about that with your therapist or, just a trusted other in your life, but to really maybe unpack how that impacted you, because there's a reason why you mentioned that in this post, that there's that little bit of the past that is coming up now that your sibling's considering surgery. So yeah, that seemed important for you to just take some time to sit with and to try to resolve with them if you're open to talking through it. As far as DBT skills go, Kate already listed out a few really nice ones. I came to radical acceptance. I really did. And I love too what the listener says here at the end of like, in the end, I told them I think the most important thing is bodily autonomy and that I support them if they believe this is what they need and that I hope they'll be well and that I love them. And then they said, right, still, I'm so afraid. And it perfectly exemplifies radical acceptance. When we radically accept things, you know what? Sometimes we still feel all the feelings. Radical acceptance is not like this off switch on our emotions. It's not like, oh, I'm radically accepting that, they're going to have this surgery and that, this is, who they are. And like, I'm accepting all of that. And you're still going to feel the fear, right? You're still going to feel it. So it's not about making the emotions go away or anything like that. But for me, I think radical acceptance is about peace of mind, trying as best we can to let go in a way that brings us to this place of recognizing, right, what we can and can't control, what we can and can't do. and releasing ourselves from trying to control the things that we really can't. And you can't control whether or not your sibling is going to have this surgery. You can't control the partners that they choose to have relationships with. Like you can't control any of these things. And radical acceptance would be letting go of trying to think that you might be able to say or do something to impact that stuff. Because there's nothing you can say or do to impact that stuff. They're going to make the decisions they're going to make. And when you let go of trying to control those things, that's when I hope you find a little more peace of mind. That this takes up a little less room in your brain, a little less energy. So yeah, it's not about stopping the worry. But it is about trying to make sure that you're really clear on where you stop and they begin. And I think a lot of times we fall into this with people we love where those lines can get a little blurry. And maybe that's going on a little bit here. So I'm hoping for the best for both of them. Both the listener and their sibling.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. All right, am I right? Are we on to the last one? I think we're on the last one.
Yes.
Okay. So this one reads, any tips for grieving the loss of a family member who is still alive, but very much done in your life? The backstory is my best friend and cousin is so angry with me for not making her my maid of honor that she has made the decision to cut me out of her life. She's the godmother of my daughter, and the last few years was dating a really awful and abusive man, so we haven't been close for 3 years. I've been on the outside looking in, so my choice for maid of honor was my other best friend, who has been around through everything, including a hospitalization for mental health treatment that I attended last fall. It's been made clear that this is the end of our relationship. I've done all I can. I've been using the ride the wave technique to let myself feel my feelings as they come, but it's becoming a huge hindrance in my life, and it's all I think about all the time. I have bipolar disorder, anxiety, PTSD, and have been through a lot of trauma in my 30 years. How do I let go?
I just realized they're ending this post with saying, how do I let go? And I happen to just be talking about that in response to the last listener.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in this context, right, like when we think about letting go, sometimes we really do think about endings, right? If I let go of something, it means I'm ending it. It's done. You know, I'm saying I don't care anymore and I'm walking away. But that's what it means to let go. No, it doesn't mean that. In this situation, for this listener, I really think that like letting go doesn't mean that you don't care or that you're going to forget about your cousin, but it does mean like accepting their decision and not trying to change their mind. About cutting you out. Now this is way easier said than done, of course. Especially because I say this a lot to my clients. Births, deaths, and weddings will bring things out. They're the biggest transitions that we go through over the lifespan. So a lot gets stirred up around relationships when these things are taking place. And I think it's one of those things where, I don't know, reading this, I felt like I could relate a little bit when it comes to this taking place in the context of you planning a wedding, listeners, because I had a friend, lie to me when she was a bridesmaid, and I was still trying to find ways to include her in the wedding, and she wasn't getting back to me, and ultimately, we didn't reconnect afterwards. Like, it's a scary prospect what you're going through, that the chaos of this wedding planning and her not being the maid of honor and she wants to cut you out because of it, that this could lead to lasting ramifications on your relationship. Unfortunately, it did for me and my friend. We haven't spoken since my wedding, and that was really, really sad. And also, the place that I had to get to, and I hope that you can get to this place too, is getting to a place where you can recognize that even though you made a decision that she didn't like, This was a situation of you making a decision to put yourself and your needs first. And if there's ever a time to do that, your wedding is certainly that time. It sounds like you picked a great person to be your maid of honor in choosing your other best friend. Like, you chose someone who's been really supportive to you. And I get your cousin feeling hurt and disappointed about that decision, but you don't have anything to feel guilty about here. Like, you made the best choice for you. And so I want you to feel good about that, even if she doesn't ever come back around. And I know that that's probably really hard to think about, of like, what do I do to get her back? She may not. And I know that again, is not what you want to hear. But we don't know. Like you were saying earlier, Kate, right? We don't know. We don't know the future. We don't know any of this. So if your brain is doing like those mental gymnastics, trying to be like, how do I get her back? Like, we don't know. It's going to be up to her to decide if she would come back around. Yeah. So she's not wrong for maybe struggling with the decision that you made and feeling hurt by it, but you are not wrong for making the decision you made in the first place. So I didn't add in any DBT skills there. I'm realizing I just kind of rambled on about how I can relate to this, and this is hard. And trust me, I have clients who have been in the wedding planning process, and something like this seems to always come up, where there's that one person that they're like, so-and-so is getting really mad at me that I'm not doing what they think I should be doing. It happens. But yeah, I want you to have this, I don't know, again, like this clarity for yourself that you have done nothing wrong. And that maybe that will help, rather than questioning, like, did I make the right decision? I don't know you. I don't know your situation, but I feel like you did. So I'll end it there and turn it over to you, Kate. I think you have some DBT stuff to share, which will be good.
Not a huge amount either, oddly, but you were talking, Michelle, about being able to connect with the like wedding part, and this thing happening in your past, however many years it is now ago, 4 years, almost.
Yeah,
3
almost
years,
4 years ago.
4 years.
Yeah,
I thought
I got
so.
Married.
Okay.
Yep.
And I just wanted to say similarly, though differently. I'm also going through a big grief around friendship loss. No wedding involved in mine. Though the more you talk about it, Michelle, the more really grateful I feel that apparently I didn't have that kind of drama around my weddings.
That's great.
I
lost 2 bridesmaids. And then Kate stepped in and became bridesmaid, which was amazing.
Pinch hitter. But I did have one of the people that I would have counted in the short list of my best friends ghost me last year. And I have no fucking idea why. And I am still struggling with that. So I remember when I first got to these notes, I was like, I don't feel like I have great answers for this person because I am still figuring out the answers for myself. But some things that once I paused, I was like, all right, but really, what am I doing? Like, how am I taking care of myself here? And can that be helpful for someone else? I'm actually going to put these in entirely opposite order than in my notes. I say to nobody who cares, because you guys can't see my notes and wouldn't know if I hadn't said it out loud. Anyway, again, with the no one is surprised, self-soothing, because it is my absolute go-to skill for just a giant pile of things in life. Right, baths are one of my biggest things, snuggling up in warm blankets, cuddling with my teddy bear. Right, like lots of self-soothe stuff going into this, especially when I find myself having like attacks of weeping. Right, like just huge, like big feels around it, and I just need something nice. Self-soothing is definitely where I go for that. Weirdly, because it's definitely usually in my bottom 5 least favorite.
I was gonna say, you don't
skills.
like this one at all. But you're doing it here because it could be helpful.
I know. But is all of accepts, because let's just be frank, when we're hurting this much, we all need distractions from that shit. But especially the comparisons part, which again, not normally a big fan, but like looking at what other people are going through in the world right now, that form of comparisons can sometimes be helpful for me because it can help me have gratitude for, I can get so mired down in this grief about my friend that I can stop noticing some of the amazing stuff that's going on in my life right now. That's just objectively really fucking good. And so if I can, zoom out a little bit and look at a bigger perspective on not just my life and my pain, I can better see that compared to a lot of other people's lives, I really have a shit ton of things to have gratitude about. But more than that is the comparison to my past self. I think I'm dealing with this grief in a lot more healthy ways, and just better, quote unquote, whatever that means, more smoothly, perhaps, than I would have at times in my past. So I'm really proud of myself for the mental health work that I've done to get here. And also I can see that while this is terrible, and this almost feels terrible to say, but it's not the worst thing I've been through. I have been through worse things than this, and I got through to the other side of them. And so my reason mind will tell me it's pretty dang likely I'll make it through this one as well. And so that form of comparisons has been really helpful. And then last but far from least, and one that I would say I'm in the process of, and will probably remain in the process of for a while, is radical acceptance. I definitely dip in and out of my radically accepted space. Sometimes I sit there for days and it's lovely. And then sometimes I'm like, but what if I'm just a wild stalker and I drive to her house and I sit in her driveway until she tells me why she's not my friend anymore? Which I have definitely considered more times than isn't embarrassing. So, right, like definitely have willful urges around this to do all sorts of really bad ideas. Lots of bad ideas. I definitely field many bad ideas formed by a willful denial of reality. Somehow she hasn't ghosted me. She just doesn't know that I want to talk to her again. I don't know. Anyway, my fighting reality on this one has taken many very creative forms, and continues to do so, which is why I say I'm very much still in the process of radically accepting this, because the unhealthy, unhelpful, downright creepy ideas still occur to me and still sometimes briefly feel like very good ideas. So I guess here you go. I don't know how often one can make any sort of pass at radical acceptance without wise mind being kind of assumed in there, but I'll just state it out loud because I definitely need my wise mind to crop up and be like, yo, emotion mind, whoo! Rein it in there, friendo. That's a bad idea for all of these reasons, right? All of these logical reasons why that don't go be the fucking creepy stalker. No. So, in process, with this one, and so had much empathy for the listener, going through this, and I would just say, I would say radical acceptance is probably the most important one of these that I'm practicing. And also I wanted to re-normalize it. I hope that we do this quite regularly, you and I, Michelle, but I want to re-normalize that radical acceptance is often a protracted process in which you have to re-accept reality quite often.
Over and over.
Over and over and over and over and over. And over and over and over. And over. Again. So yeah, I think, so yeah, god damn it. I can't think of anything else to say now. Your turn. There you go.
I'll wrap us up. Yeah. A lot there in that last one that I think hit home for both of us, though, for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. So we've reached and completed Q&A 50. Which is crazy. So keep the posts coming in the Facebook group and email us as well at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com if you have questions, things you're curious about. We have material for many Q&As to come, but we will make sure to reply to your email or get back to you in the Facebook group no matter what. And then you can wait for your question to crop up on a future Q&A when we get to it. And we appreciate your guys' patience with all that. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT Me Podcast.